This second panel, we have a different group of folks from varying fields, from NGO, a civil society organization, a think tank. So she's a clever woman, and she's doing her PhD right now. So really taken time out from Ideas, actually. Ideas, by the way, is the only independent think tank in Malaysia. Yes. Yeah. So we're very proud to say that. I chair the board, so I'm very happy to be associated with Ideas. Then we have Natasha. Natasha and I go back some ways. We became friends through her sister, who was with me in university. So Nat is with Harper's Bazaar. Very interesting field. I'm not going to stereotype her, but she's going to explain to us how, in a field like this, you can shape conversations or reshape conversations about women, how women see themselves. So very important conversation to be had. Then we have Ridhima, who's in talent, in the field of talent. So she will have her details on how we can make better use of women in organizations. I'm putting words into your mouth, okay? And of course, Melissa is our own Melissa, a very interesting person in a very bright young woman who's managed to navigate her way through the corporate waters to be where she is. Looking at her, you don't think she has achieved what she has achieved. If you look at her CV, it's very, very, very impressive. So we've brought all these young women on board to hear their perspectives and how they are reducing the barriers as well as reshaping the conversations around women and what to expect of women as in this new world, right? So let's start with Tricia. Having taken time out from a think tank to not just have a baby, but to do a PhD. I'm so impressed. Okay, Tricia, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Tan Sri, for the introduction. Firstly, thank you to EcoWorld as well for inviting me here. I think it's great to have this particular civil society and think tank industry represented in a largely corporate environment. I also am happy to see some male faces in the audience. It would be nice if there was a quota to have 50% of the audience actually male, the way we like to push for 50% quota, because I really think that this conversation needs to be added to by the husbands, by the fathers, because they play an equal share, as the previous panel said earlier. To make all of this work, the men really need to step up and give in their opinions as well. So before I talk about my personal and professional journey, I'd like to also say that while it's great and excellent that we have these conversations increasing each year within these sorts of environments, I hear that Maybank is having another one and the UN and so on, it's also important to remember that the conversation needs to be carried outside of these urban settings. So we are used to working in this corporate professional environment where perhaps the management levels, the C-suites have already been made aware of the fact that gender needs to be inclusive and so on, but not so much outside of the Klang Valley, number one, and of course number two, within government as well. Just on a final note on that, recently, the Malaysian representation was at the CEDAW Summit. I think it was in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken, as Tan Sri Rebecca mentioned earlier. We are a signatory of CEDAW, which is one of the international treaties and the conventions that we are signatory to. And one of the unfortunate things was that our delegation still was going on a rather, conservative note. Perhaps not all of you know that female genital mutilation, FGM, for instance, is still very widely practiced in Malaysia. And the representation from Malaysia actually still tried to justify these practices in our country. So just to make us more aware of the fact that we may be in a little bit of a bubble here while we're talking about advances in this conversation, but there's a lot out there that we still need to change culturally and socially. Okay, so I've put my think tank policy spiel out there, and then now I can come back to my personal story. So I work in a think tank. It's an independent think tank. We deal very much with public policy. We deal with ministries. In my past, I've also worked in a very political environment. I worked in the Selangor Menteri Besar's office during the first term when the change of government took place. And let me tell you that in that particular political circle, it is an extremely patriarchal society. And part of the research that I've done in the past with other feminists also shows that women in politics have extremely tough time and challenges. They feel like they need to prove themselves. And if you remember, sometimes in parliament, certain comments are made which are very unsavory. Right now, we have only 10% of our members of parliament who are women. This is based on the 2013 election results. 10% of the candidates were also only women. So while we think about women representation on boards, we also need to think about women who are actually going to be making the decisions at the legal level, at the parliamentary level. So that's my exposure. It's interesting that we come to talk about balancing work and family at a time where I, as you can see, am actually pregnant. So these conversations are really things that I am thinking about myself as I think about my future, what kind of work life, not just balance, but I think the new term is work-life integration, right? So it's not just about, you having a scale and one tips over the other, but it's rather complicated. You've got lines that go through life and work, and it's a constant struggle to not balance, but to integrate these two things together. The research around the world shows that there's not so much a gender pay gap as there is a gap when a woman actually has her first child. So if you look at the graphs, and this, mind you, is research done in Sweden. So it's the Scandinavian countries which have even more advanced policies. So in countries like Sweden, you see the graph, the women and men actually earn fairly about the same amount until the woman has her first child, and then the graph dips rapidly. And in the Malaysian context, we don't have the research to show that, but we know that once women have children, they rarely come back to work. The statistics for Malaysia is even more dismal compared to our regional neighbors. So compared to Vietnam, compared to Philippines, women in Vietnam and Philippines and in the region actually return to work on a higher pace compared to our kind in Malaysia, which is surprising. So this is disturbing. I wanted to share that because I'm in this public policy and think tank circle, that there was this article that was circulated in 2012, some time ago. She worked for the US State Department. Her name was Anne Marie Slaughter. I'm not sure if some of you read it. The title of the article was "Why Women Still Can't Have It All." And I think that really struck home the realities of the struggles that women will always face. Women seem to have to make these choices, which men sometimes do if they're a little bit more conscious of the responsibilities that they should share at home. But it seems that these are the choices that we are forced to make. And her journey was that she had to give up spending time with the children. She had to deal with perhaps the guilt of maybe not being there at special momentous occasions when the children had certain successes at home. So it seems that women have to struggle with this guilt all the time. On the one hand, you're guilty for not being at home, taking care of the child, or during these special moments. And on the other hand, you feel guilty that you are not at work all of the time, and you need to be apologetic to your bosses and so on. I'm just putting these little themes out there because I'm also thinking about this as I think about what's going to happen to me when I do return back to full-time work in the organization of ideas. Another controversial thing which I think maybe has not been mentioned is the fact that while we push for equality, that the men should carry equal weight at home, sharing in the chores and so on, is the fact, and we cannot change this fact, that women are the ones who will have to bear the child. And there is a sort of biological clock. So it's controversial to say that, but yet you can't change that. I mean, maybe science has advanced to a stage that men can perhaps breastfeed in the future. There has actually been some incidents that were recorded that men could, miraculously breastfeed when necessary, but men will not be able to bear the child. So if that's the case, then what do we say about what kind of policies are being facilitated for women at the workplace? And I found this really interesting article that companies in the US like Facebook and Google actually have a facility for women to freeze their eggs. So this is controversial because critics also would say that by providing this egg freezing facility to the women, the message that you're actually sending to the workplace is that work is more important. So you prioritize work before you think about your families. But one could also say that from the employer's point of view, they are trying to be forward-looking. They are trying to give women the choice if they wanted that option. It's not like we're forcing you to take it, but if you wanted that option, you could take it and still focus on your career. I think we are very, very far away from having that kind of policy, but that's just to generate some discussion around the fact that we are the ones who will be biologically carrying the child. So I think I have more to say, but we'll continue the discussion after this, all about what I think needs to happen for these changes to help us. Thank you.
See what happens when you have a researcher in your midst. All right, thank you so much. Nat, would you like to add to that conversation? From my perspective, for folks like you in this beauty, media, you play a major role in shaping perceptions, as we talked about earlier. So let's hear.
Firstly, thank you for having me, Tan Sri, Rebecca. The panel I had before us, Chainyo, Dato' Anusha, and Rajate Maimuna, I mean, they were incredible. I was just telling Tan Sri, I said, we don't need a coffee break after this, we need some alcohol to live up to it. But, when I was sitting there and thinking, really, I've got so much to say. I mean, that's what I do for a living. Role models. I grew up in a very broken family, I wasn't really mothered. I had a father who played that role as mother and father. So in that sense, I didn't have a female role model in my life. I think Tan Sri knows my family history. And I lost my father at 19. So I had to figure out life. It took me 40 years to figure out my life. Trust me, and upside down, inside out. And what was incredible was at 27, I was given this opportunity to take the editorship at Harper's Bazaar. It had just launched in Malaysia. I felt I just had 2 children at 27. I was just grappling with life. And I said, I just wanted to be the fashion editor. I just wanted to style pretty pictures. Somehow my CEO then believed in me and said, you have done a master's in journalism, you've got newspaper experience, you've got book publishing experience, take this on. It began from there, a woman who believed in me. Secondly, to be in an industry, it's quite different from what everyone's been talking about, I mean, the issues that are faced from industry to industry really is quite diverse. In my industry, my job first as a journalist, but secondly, as the editor-in-chief of a women's magazine, we celebrate women. I found that a great opportunity not just to celebrate women, but also to have the kind of role models I never had in my life as a woman, as a girl. And just listening to everyone's stories, be it a model story or a CEO or an MD. Of course, we do interviews with men as well, but for me personally, women were also so inspiring. So sitting here and listening to the 4 ladies who've paved the way, incredible. I think we made a lot of progress in that sense. I work in a very different industry. I mean, it's not corporate, it's creative. 95% are women. So when we talk about in terms of equality, when we talk in terms of gender equality, sometimes I'm just, what do you mean? I mean, you know, the guys who work in my industry are the photographers, we boss them around. The men are really, truly bossed around. They earn a quarter our salary, you know? So in fact, you know, they need an International Men's Day. Or at least for people in the creative industry. Yeah, so we have very different issues. And the issues, I feel, I've been the editor-in-chief for 15 years, is, and especially in this day and age where everything is, you know, accessible to us via social media, online, you know, information at our fingertips. It's really not about the kind of issues, women being first or being celebrated, women's rights. For us, it's really pushing it much further. And when Tan Sri, you know, said this is all about reshaping conversations, removing barriers. For us in fashion or in publishing, we're talking about ethnic diversity. We're talking about women with limitations. We're talking about the immigration issues around the world. So when a lot of people look at Harper's Bazaar and all the glamorous shoots that we do, in fact, you know, we have a shoot happening in LA as we speak, which I'm trying to manage by remote. It is a platform for that. You know, it's a platform to weave that into the work that we do. So, coming back to the conversations that we're having today. A lot of people in my industry especially expect me to be an influencer. You know, they expect me to be swanning about, you know, the fashion capitals of the world, wearing borrowed clothes and being a personality. And yet I look back and, you know, at the work I've done and I said I've come this far to really celebrate other people, you know, women, their voices, their opinions. And it is a position of influence for me. I don't need to be an influencer. It is a position of influence, you know, a platform of that, you know, to actually have these kind of conversations. Today in fashion, we see all sorts of models on the runway. In the last 2 years, we've had 3 hijab models, which really says a lot about the diversity, the ethnic diversity in fashion. We see an albino model, we see models with disabilities, we see oversized models. And this conversation has been going on in fashion and in my industry, in the media for 15 years. You know, it's beyond being a woman.
But would you put a plus-size model on the cover of Harper's Bazaar?
Not necessarily so, only because it's not about having a beauty ideal. You know, I mean, a lot of the celebrities that have been on the cover of Harper's Bazaar, you know, for instance, the shoot we're doing right now is a celebrity. She's an actress, a dancer, and she's an immigrant. And she is really creating waves. So for me, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. Stories don't have to kind of automatically go out, you know, be in your face. You know, you don't need to have a disabled model on the cover, for instance, to really make a point. Yeah, so that is that's.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of criticism around the fashion industry that we idolize thin, fair-skinned women.
Yes.
You know, and so folks that are darker skinned, bigger size, then sort of feel discriminated against. Yes. So we discriminate against ourselves.
Yes. I think, you know, sometimes when you're just, I mean, fashion people live in a bubble. You know, there's nothing more than just getting the perfect picture. And sometimes, you know, like the beauty ideals are so ingrained in your mind that you will always choose someone, a model or a celebrity who represents a beauty ideal. So, you know, that is something that's been challenged, I think, in the last 15 years. It's been so controversial. You know, using underage models, using like almost anorexic models. But I think we've gone beyond that. You know, that the conversation has really moved beyond that into what more can we do? And I think some designers are really trying to make a point on the runways in using that as a platform, because now everyone has access to what's happening in the runways of the world, right? As far as a plus-size model, we have, I mean, slightly larger models, but I think we need to say a lot more than that.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, Ridhima, would you like to add to this conversation? Because you work with talents.
Yes.
So do you influence talents in other than the corporate sector?
Not necessarily, I would say largely our clients are typically corporates, but I think starting from, I would say I was not a typical person to get into corporate to begin with. I come from a business family where it's me and my sister and my mom at house with my dad. So he's really not the power center. So unlike most people see, my dad has very little control and power in the house. So while he's the one, for a large time till we were 25 or 22, he was the only bread earner, but he still didn't get a lot of power with it. So, so money didn't buy him power. So, so I think what I felt, and the reason why I walked into this profession of building talent for organizations. So I've been doing this for almost 12 years now. Since I started my career, I've focused on talent. We help organizations build through various interventions and things that we've realized in corporates especially, where a lot of young women participate and they want to grow, and we heard beautiful examples that we had in the previous panel there. There are organizations who do it well. There are organizations who don't focus on it. Even in organizations that want to do it, as in organizations like EcoWorld, there are many others, and EcoWorld is a good example to do so, but there are many others who invest in their people. They pay a lot of money to people like us to build their pipeline. They even ensure that if it's a pool of 40 people being given to us, there is fair representation being given. So they've made that effort that, okay, I have 20 women, 20 men there in the room. And they're forcing into it, I must say, because they want to be making sure that they have a balanced pipeline to build in. What we realize is that when I'm investing individual time with these 40 people, there is a huge difference between how women take those opportunities and how men take those. And it's like almost fed to you, to yourself, to really realize. But there's a lot of hesitation that I see in young women talent to say that, okay, I don't want this. It's a leadership program. I'm okay, and I'm sorry, but I can't feel the choices of a pregnant woman yet, so I might not be appropriate on it, but people do make choices when they're telling us that, oh no, I'm getting married this year, so I don't know if I want to do it. And even
like
then.
what Chai was making that point earlier as well,
yeah.
weren't you?
So, and these are very young women.
So what do you do to them, because you develop talent, so what
Yes.
do you do to change that mindset?
Okay, so I think it goes much deeper than that, and we have the fortune of doing a lot of analytics with people's personalities. And when we are doing these analytics, and I was telling the panel in the early morning conversation that there is a stereotype with women that they are more structured and they are very methodical, they are control freaks, they're going to organize your day. But in our research across the world, it's not so stereotyped. It's actually not there. It's largely, their personalities are not designed, but there is a norm of the role that is expected out of them. And hence they deliver it according to it. And that's how they are expected to grow. Vis-a-vis, with respect to another aspect of it, what we call ambition. Because all these things somewhere come from a core sense of ambition. Do you want to be, do you want that limelight be seen as an individual there? Unfortunately, I would say so, that while the organizations are doing their bit to contribute to some extent, and I will say very few of them, but there are organizations that are doing it. The core ambition that we see, if I say 20 packs of women that I am investing in, I would not have more than 4 to 5 women who really want to do it. And this comes much inherent. It comes from the way you're groomed at home, the way the opportunities that are given to you in your very personalities from a science point of view gets kind of formed when you are up till 12 to 14 years by large. As in, yes, there is DNA to it, but it can be formed up till your 12 to 14 years of age. And this ambition is somewhere not let it blossom right at the beginning of your life. So which then translates into what we see, the missing gaps at boards, and then in your talents, and then going down to yours. Somehow it just gets lost, so which is unfortunate to see. What we do ensure thereon is that we still push very hard to our maxes to give them opportunities like these. So we conduct these kind of programs to bring them on the table, to make sure that they are given similar opportunities to, and we question during our clients in their promotion mechanisms, why are you leaving behind? This person doesn't have a spark. I said, probably you never asked him to speak. Because another challenge that we've seen, and honestly, I come from a very fortunate organization. I don't see that challenge as a professional in my organization. My global CEOs have been women, and still there is a fairly represent. Even regional levels, local levels, I report directly to the country MD. So I don't see personally, I haven't seen that bias that much, but I've observed for other people a lot. There's a tendency for women to, in boardrooms, and I'm sure you see it, or in management conversation, to start their conversations with things like, sorry, can I contribute? Could I? So there's a lot of permission seeking that happens, and it goes much deeper into our psyche somewhere. And you don't need to do that. And I'm sure here we heard the lawyer speaking with so much confidence. It doesn't need to start with that. It needs to start with that I recommend. And men with their, sorry, being biased, but today is the day for us, so be it. So, yeah. See, it goes much deeper into it. But when they start, it's the confidence with 50% information will be much stronger vis-a-vis 100% confident response will come with apology at the opening. So and then I don't flaw the decision maker because the decision maker wasn't sure where you're going with it. And then I was quoting this another example or particular data that I read about that, again, the data is not available for Malaysia, my apologies. It's available for Supreme Court courts in US. And they did an analysis on how much arguments get generated or being questioning is done between male and female lawyers. So they said that female lawyers get interrupted 75% more, 3 times more than the male lawyers. So male lawyers, they speak with confidence, they're out of it, the decision is made. However, female lawyers have to defend everything 3 times. So that goes to now back to the rest of the kind that we were talking about. So where is that inherent bias in them also against it? So while we are not putting across our point confidently, now the tables have to turn on their side to say that what is in your mind that you don't trust what we say, and you want the evidence much stronger than the gut that you have. So it's about making sure that you bring and create those opportunities. And these are simple things. Can I not coach a woman to not start with a sorry? I can. By a conscious effort, I think we can change it. But it's about being aware of those small little things which influence our stakeholders' bias around it. So
it's both ways. You got to train both ways.
Absolutely. You need to train both sides of the coin to make sure, and I think we heard that enough, that it's about collaboration. It's not about me versus them. So
okay, that's a nice segue into Melissa. Melissa, you have a tough role because your boss is sitting here. So you've got to measure everything you say. Or the boss can close his ears for a while. Yeah, okay. Melissa, take us through your challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Tan Sri. For those who have known me and who some of them are here today who have known my background, I started in corporate finance, and I can relate very much to Dr. Anusha and Rajate, sharing their experiences. I started off as a banker, and being in CF, I think for those who know the story of working in CF, you basically sacrifice a lot of your personal time, during the early days when you really have to go through papers and loads of documentation, right? And it just gets worse as the disclosure regime, making you disclose more, and so paperwork just gets more. So I was starting off. I started off in another PLC, but then I joined the bank, and then that's when I started to develop my career in corporate finance, and because you have to climb through the corporate ladder and work through your way, you stay back a lot, you sacrifice your weekends, but I think at the end of the day, it's really, did I enjoy what I did, you know? And I think if you ask my friends, I think I never complained about, you know, working late or having to forego. Yes, sometimes you have to miss certain events, family events and all that, and friendship, time with friendship, but at the end of the day, what do you get? Yes, I get satisfaction out of the work, and I think that's what kept me going throughout those years. So, and I think I enjoyed the banking days a lot, and that's why I stayed on. But I really left the bank because, for my boss who knew, I left the bank when I had my kid, right? Sad to say, well, why I made that choice, but because I think the hours were far too long, and I didn't have the support in the initial stage of, you know, I think mothers here will appreciate that when you get a helper, you still needed someone to watch over the helper, because you're just not comfortable to leave a young infant with the helper, right? So I didn't have that framework then, the support then, so I felt, okay, I needed to spend a little bit more time. So I left to take a more structured time, you know, where I could get off work on time just to take care of the kid. After about a year or so, then, you know, I felt that I miss my working life. I really enjoyed what I did. So opportunity came, you know, and that's when I joined the company, my ex-employer Satya, and then now EcoWorld. But I truly believed in finding passion in what you do, and that's what kept me going. I mean, and of course, in my tenure, I have now 2 boys, you know, my eldest is 12 and the second one is 9. So after I left the corporate scene, I went into commercial. It was busy, yes, but I think it was more manageable because the time was a little bit more flexible as opposed to banking. But during that period, you just have to manage and of course, find the support that you need. But I think more importantly is my husband, my helper. I think you need to rely on whatever support you have and manage it accordingly, so that you know you don't feel the guilt so much, right? I think many mothers here will share, if you're a working mother, there are times where you come back late and then your child is asleep. But I go through all that as well, you know. But I just have to manage the time, and because now with Eco International. UK zone, you know, UK time zone is different. So I do get a lot of emails past working hours, but all that is part of work, right? And as long as you achieve what you need to do, you can adapt to your own time, I think, and your children understands, your husband understands, yeah, so then you can achieve better results out of that. So I think same goes with my team, right? I have a very young team in the office now. They are millennials and they are Gen Ys, you know. So sometimes they will wonder, how do you cope, right? Being a mother and they are all young. Most of them are not married yet, but so sometimes they come to me and they have to catch my time. But I told them, you know, I may respond at odd times, you know, at times because I have to attend to the family or attend to certain things, so they understand. So it's engaging with the younger generation to also understand, and men and women likewise. You know, I think the younger generation are in this era where it's not so. Women are not perceived to be you have to stay at home, or you know, so they respect women bosses. There are a lot of, and we are in an organization, EcoWorld is in an organization where women empowerment is very strong, right? And fortunately for me, I have, you know, I'm in a board where Rebecca is also a board member, and she empowers women and then she drives diversity, and my board members are also very encouraging in that respect. So yeah, of course there are challenges, but I think we manage it along the way. Yeah. So
I think one thing that's coming through in this conversation is the word support.
Yes.
There's 2 things that struck me. One is support, the other is bubble. Both of you refer to this place that we're in as a bubble. But coming back to support, I think that's really a topic that keeps coming up when we talk about women's issues. It's always, or women in the workplace, it always goes back to support. Mm-hmm. And sacrifices. I've been asked, how did you what kind of sacrifices did you make? I mean, some of us had to, and in my case, because I didn't want a full-time helper, I put my daughter in boarding school. You get a lot of flack, in an Asian environment when you put the only child in a boarding school. They say, what kind of mother are you? But at the end of the day, it's a sacrifice you make, and it's a decision that is taken consciously in collaboration with the rest of the family. I think that's the important thing. But coming back to bubble and some questions here. Many people are avoiding being branded as feminists because the label is becoming more negative and extremist. What does feminism mean to you? Are you a feminist? Okay, go for it. Any one of you. The research says, Tricia.
No, I think if you studied sociology in yeah, I have all these theories in my head, but I won't bore you with it. I think the term feminism has probably been largely misunderstood. I think, and I'm probably treading on dangerous ground here, but with the Me Too hashtag movement this year, I think that has pushed the feminism narrative to somewhat of an extreme at times. So much so that I think many men feel that their voices are being silenced because they are unable to represent their views fairly. I think that feminism is a range, it's a spectrum. If you believe in empowering women, then you should already be considered a feminist. You shouldn't be afraid of calling yourself that. I think some people, the minority perhaps, take that view to the extreme where you shut down the voices of men completely, and I think that's unfortunate. So one should not fall into that trap of being a feminist. I think language is very important, not just from an academic point of view. I know that we use a lot of words like sacrifice as well on this panel and also the previous one. Someone corrected me once and said that it's not a sacrifice if you have made that conscious choice, and perhaps the better word to use is a trade-off. I mean, or an exchange. You're exchanging one thing for another. So the previous panel, I think Rajate was saying that one should not discriminate or belabor women who actually make that choice to stay at home, while all of us are choosing to stay at work. Someone who chooses to stay at home has made a trade-off, perhaps not a sacrifice as such. So just the language, yeah, is important.
Yeah. So I know, go ahead, Nat.
Sorry, I wouldn't use the word feminist, I would use the word humanist. I think, it's beyond just being a woman. In the 20s to the 70s, women had to fight aggressively for their rights, for their place at home, let alone their place at work. I'm sure you'd agree with me, to be a humanist, because then again, feminism in a way sometimes belittles a man. Yeah. When we think about, what's happening with hashtag #MeToo, Time's Up, all the cases that are coming up, I mean, we're even talking about men, male models who are also kind of like, mistreated by male photographers. It's just treating each other well. The other thing is, I read a lot of Eckhart Tolle, and the first thing he says in his book, A New Earth, is about words, attachment to words, labeling. And I work in an industry that is all about words. I mean, you plant a word on your cover line, and then you expect, like thousands of readers to respond to it, and that's the danger in that. Feminism is can be a very, narrowing label.
Ridhima?
I think I concur with points there. Is essentially, I don't think feminism is anything wrong with it. To use the word, it's about interpretation, how people see it. Like everything else, there is extremism in it, but sometimes that extremism is important also to highlight. You need that thing to come out. So and then what you do with it is what matters. So sometimes at hype, and I'm probably media is the right to look into it or to say, add on to it more, but I think that sometimes words are good to start off the conversation, but it's about what do you do after that is what makes a difference. And similarly with the whole aspect of element of sacrifice, I think I totally agree that people don't make sacrifices, people make choices. And if it was a choice, then you can't have both sides of the world. And you can't say it's a regret. So you can't say that after 10 years, oh, I should have stayed back home or I should have gone back to office. It was a choice in those circumstances that you made, and you need to then stand by your choices. So that's...
Absolutely. Melissa?
Yeah, I think in terms of, because to me, men and women are wired very differently, right? And then we contribute in our own way and very differently. So I can't do a lot of things that perhaps my husband does, or women does things very differently, right? But if you complement it together, I think it comes out perfectly fine. And I think feminism it's always construed in a negative manner because of the context, but really, we shouldn't look at it that way. And that's how I think in the corporate scene now, we're pushing for board diversity, right? Women on board, and some people seem to think that, oh, you just need to achieve your 30% women quota, but that's not really the case, right? You really want to bring out the women workforce that can actually contribute to the society, and I think there are a lot of women out there who wants to do that, but they don't know how and where is the platform or how to approach. So to the younger ones out there, I really think that, don't be afraid. Go back to your personality. At the end of the day, what does your personality say about you? If you want to do, you don't have to be at the highest level, you just have to do what you do best, and I think you'll be appreciated for that.
Yeah, I think also this stark dichotomy of choice that we are painting for ourselves today is a false dichotomy. I think that with the advent of technology and the responsibility that lies at our hands at the end of the day, do we deliver the work? I think this is where women actually can negotiate. So this goes back to policy, actually. It goes back to whether companies, government, employers themselves are able to give women, again, it goes back to flexible hours, it goes back to ability to work from home. So I think that we are really lucky. I mean, I am actually very fortunate as I'm thinking through my own choices, that the choice isn't that I take a complete 2 or 3 year break from work, but perhaps I still keep in touch. Perhaps I'm fortunate in that I'm still able to do some writing, public speaking, contribution from home, which I think many of our roles allow us to have. And I think it also therefore depends on the nature of work, number one, and number two, the level of seniority that you have in your organization. So the question I actually still have would be, would the culture accept, for instance, a flexible hour CEO woman, a mother, a flexible hour or a part-time CEO? I mean, yes, perhaps for lower level functions, but have we advanced to the stage that is possible? I think it's still something that we struggle with.
Okay, I have to go back to those questions, otherwise people are going to get really upset with me. This one had appeared earlier and it keeps coming back, so clearly they're not happy that I didn't ask it earlier. Right? Okay, men age right? Men age like fine wine. Fine wine? But as a woman, there is the added pressure to maintain your appearance, makeup, fashion, etc. to excel at work. I don't know, man.
Ask these questions.
You have to go for it.
I'd like to be the people who've asked this question.
Who asked this? Put up your hand. Okay, put up your hand. There are 21 of you. 21 people asked this question. Terrible. Okay, go for it. Natasha, you want to take this one?
It's just man or woman, it's just as simple as presentation.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all professionals. We represent ourselves first and foremost, then we represent our values, we represent our families and good names. So it is just that, I think a lot of women invest a little bit more in that sense in, as you say, makeup, fashion, etc. Because they have the liberty to do so. We have plenty more choices. Poor men in their monkey suits. And we enjoy ourselves doing that. I mean, you can actually...
It's fun, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I've been trying for years to get my husband to go for mani-pedi. For me, it's not gender specific. Anybody can go for...
No, but I think the people asking the question actually have a real concerned because it's true. I mean, I feel like the women have to maybe wake up earlier to put on all your makeup and your dress, which men probably just wake up, half an hour before they leave. Yeah.
And you can keep it as simple or as elaborate as you want it to be. You know what I mean? You look beautiful, and I think with very minimum effort.
Thank you.
So, right? Yeah. It's really what you want and how much time and resources you want to invest in yourself.
Okay, I want to go to the next question, the next popular question. Again, this appeared earlier. I chose to ignore it. What about the perception that women are too emotional for management roles? This is a disturbing thing. I don't think. I'm going to answer. Sorry. It's not that we're too emotional. We are perceived to be too emotional. I don't know why that perception is so. I remember in the Ministry of Trade when sometimes I have outbursts. It's not emotional, it's just an outburst.
It's a rational outburst.
Yeah, you deserve it. When you deserve it, you get it. And I think you would get into a lot of trouble if you mention this to Tan Sri Rafida, who if you say she's emotional, she's just very strong and very loud. And she has this. By the way, she has a blog, so y'all go to her Facebook blog. Very interesting. And I laugh when I read it because when she was our minister, if she didn't approve of what we'd written in the memo or the report, it would come back to us and we would say it came back to us screaming because it would be in caps, really big letters, capitals, and exclamation. So I know, oops, minister screaming. It's nothing to do with emotion, but it's really a way of. I think when women assert themselves, they assume they're perceived to be aggressive and therefore emotional. I think it's unfair. Anyway, you guys.
But I thought I'll just add on to that. I mean, it's perceived that, men cannot cry in front of, public. But to me, it's okay, if it's a way of showing that, your anger or sadness. I think whether it's women or men, you should have a right to show, and I don't think it should be perceived in a negative manner. So for men out there, if they want to express anything, I think even to me it's fine. I don't see him being weak or any less of a man. Yeah.
And emotion is so wide.
Yeah.
Anger is an emotion, and a man. You're talking about ego versus emotion. So women would express it differently, but a man, my gosh. Have you seen an angry man?
I think it's true that women have an added advantage of actually having a more nurturing side, which is not necessarily a bad thing to have at the management level. It means that you're actually looking out for your employees better. As the CEO of Ideas, we were looking through our maternity and paternity benefits, and I actually pushed for a longer maternity leave. This is before I got pregnant, so nothing to do with me. And we also had paternity leave of 2 weeks, so I'm not sure what the norm is in the corporate circles, but 2 weeks paternity leave I think is relatively long. If I'm not mistaken, most companies have, 3 days? 3 days? Yeah, that's the norm. So I think... is that emotional? I'm looking out for the needs of my employees and my staff, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think when that question comes up, you're talking about decisions where you are pitting it emotional decisions, emotional versus rational decisions. I don't think that it's again a dichotomous world. I think one can be emotional in looking out for the welfare of your staff, but equally rational. So you still exercise both parts of your brain. I don't think that's impossible.
The other question that also is that I'm going to skip the gender pay gap unless you want to have your input on that, because in government there is no gender pay gap. Everybody gets equal pay, and we had this because I mentioned one of the acts that we did, so not a problem. But I'm not sure in the corporate world whether that exists.
Yeah.
So you may want to mention.
I think it definitely exists. It doesn't exist at an entry level much, as was told earlier. So usually the starting salaries are similar as it goes by. For most countries, I would say. However, from data and facts, as it goes higher up, especially the senior most levels, there is a fair amount of difference that exists. But Needless to say, it also comes from the point that what kind of roles are women taking. Typically in an organization, unlike again, I know EcoWorld doesn't do that bias, but in a lot of organizations, there are typecast roles for women employees or senior management employees. It's HR, HR managers in Malaysia especially, there are a lot of HR managers who are women. There is some level of legal, corporate legal, you see a lot of those. Non-business roles typically. You don't see in business, and that defines the worth of the role then. Because you're not in decision-making business roles, so hence the worth of the role will start creating more distance even at the top layer for you. So because you're not given those roles or you don't volunteer for those critical roles at the top, and hence it then differentiates, you come to the outcome that it comes to. So it goes both ways. There is a difference, but there are also rationals to it.
The other spheres, I think in think tanks we don't care. Everybody gets paid. Yeah. Very little anyway.
Yeah. Very little.
Yeah. But you have mostly women in your. Mostly women.
Yes. They're paid more in your profession,
they're
right?
paid more than the men. So that's a good thing. Yeah. The other question here, I thought this one also. I think it's from some of the comments that you all made earlier. Women get interrupted 3 times more than men. Have you been cut off by men at work? How did you handle it? Let me say I never got cut off by men.
Okay, I think I have very interesting experiences of those. I have met, I've been fortunate enough to have very solid, straight conversations, but I've also been in scenarios where even when the person on the other side is interrupting me or is cutting me off, is not having an eye contact with me. So the person is not, so if I am in a room and there's a full of people, instead of giving that comment to me, and because it's my point that I'm putting in force, the person is looking somewhere else. So that's very disrespectful. And that goes back to anybody that you're having conversations with. If you're having a conversation with a person, that really brings people's confidence down. Because then you're just throwing in comments.
The question asks, how did you handle it?
So usually, I think it's important to sometimes watch those behaviors in those rooms. Is about, so either you ask the person to be specific about it, if you're being so usually when you're interrupted 3 times, they'll ask for validations of things. I think it's an extra job. We need to assert more, and we need to assert with passion, with confidence. So if the choice of words will define, we need to provide more data, facts, to give your opinions, which might not be required for the other gender that much. So you have to deal with it by being more prepared for it, because it's going to happen to you. And max that you can do is at the end of the conversation is just like, just assert that what was your intention behind it.
We have to wind up. In 3 seconds or less, your final words on this International Women's Day, celebrating International Women's Day.
I think it's really fortuitous being here as well, because I just found out that I'm having a girl. So I really hope, and I was really thinking of this when I was at the first panel earlier, that I really hope that I can live up to these ideals of women that have forged greater paths before me. And of course, it's, well, to use the word emotional, of course it's emotional. I hope that my future daughter absorbs everything that all of you are saying and have been saying today. I think EcoWorld asked me for a quote before we came and to use for their publicity, and I really felt that there are barriers. We didn't get to those actual barriers in this conversation, but I hope that these, whatever they are, psychological, mental barriers within ourselves, within the men who are in our lives, can get broken down, because I want this better future for my child, and the same for all of your children. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Just 2 points. I mean, all the challenges that we've spoken about from the first panel to now, there's been challenges. Let's not forget that we have a voice. Sometimes you just feel that, no one's listening, people are trying to, I hope someone will pick up and give you an opportunity. The thing is, you represent yourself, say it, make it clear if you need support. It doesn't have to come across aggressively, but just remember that is your power, your own voice. And secondly, I mean, with that voice, being a feminist or being a man who claims to be a feminist, I think thing I really want to stress on being a humanist, I think we have to be kind and good to each other. We are a community, and to not forget that. Today we celebrate one day out of 365. We go back to being human individuals after this. So I think that's going to be a great step forward.
Thank you.
I think I'll try to stick to 3 seconds. Just 2 words for everybody, courage and collaborate. I think keep that courage on and collaborate with people. There is support available.
Thank you.
For me, I just think that, for women, we just have to be ourselves, and we multitask very well, and I think I don't stress enough. I think for me, women can do multitasking a lot better, and we should just harness on that strength and go out there and manage your people around you and tell them what you want, and you must believe in what you can do. I think that's important.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Really, really enlightening. Thank you so much for spending the time. Thank you, Tan Sri Liew, for giving us this opportunity. Tan Sri, for sitting through all this. Ladies and gentlemen, I must say again, I'm so grateful and so blessed to be given this opportunity to moderate the session, to speak this morning, to share ideas and thoughts with you on such an important day. Thank you again.